Okay, there we go. All right. So I welcome you all tonight to the Powers Creek Restoration Planning Meeting. Um, Ottawa Watershed Council is the host with the city of Blue Lake. We're also here with the engineering team, SHN, and Northern Hydrology Engineers. And we welcome you all to participate in this conversation. We're going to have presentations, and you can raise your hand for clarifying questions. I want to start by going around the room. We have a lot of people here, so I'd like you to just state your name and whether you live alongside the creek or in the floodplain, or you can say both. So we will, yeah, you want to bring that mic around? That should work. Okay, let's start there.
Um, I'm Karen Barnes. This is Marty Schwartz, and our property, Powers Creek, um, goes at half of it, and we've had issues with flooding in the last 2 years, and it's been an ongoing issue, and we're really excited to see what the presentation is and what we can do about it.
Great, thank you, Kathy.
Where we sit.
And let's just keep going around whatever direction we want to go. Okay, counterclockwise.
My name's John Murray. I don't live by the creek. I play pickleball on the courts and they get flooded. But I know a lot about hydrology and I used to work for the county. I'm an engineer and at my age, my number is lower than all of yours. But anyway, so I'm interested here because it might apply to other places.
Thank you, John.
Hey there, my name is Marnin Robbins, and I live, I don't know, about 150 yards stone throw from the creek.
Thank you, Marnin.
I'm Trevor Eslow, and we lived right along the creek, right across from the horse arena. So we had some floodwaters last January. So
Yeah, thank you, Trevor.
experienced it.
I'm Roxanne Rothery. I live in the floodplain, and we've had floodwater in our yard at least twice this year.
Thank you, Roxanne.
My name is Austin Marshall. I do not live in McKinley, or I live in McKinleyville, not here. And there's a similar situation, but not as severe with Norton Creek that runs right through the front yard where I live.
Thank you, Austin.
I'm Rose Jonathan, and I do not live in the creek or in the floodplain. I have been a member of the Ottawa Watershed Council now for about 4 years.
Thank you, Rose.
My name is Michelle Lewis Lusso. I do not live near the project or the creek, or I live in another area of the town, but I am part of the Blue Lake City Council.
Thank you for
Happy to
being here tonight.
I'm Dana Silvernail. I live up on 3rd Avenue. We never get flooded, so we're fortunate.
Thank you, Dana.
Okay. I'm Karina Green, and I live a couple of blocks from Powers Creek, and it really flooded. The water came. There's been some problems down there, so which you guys are well aware of. Anyway.
Thank you, Karina.
Hi, I'm T. Griffin, and yeah, I live with Marnin on Charton Road. Our property's partly in the floodplain.
Thank you, T.
Hi, my name is Frank Onstein, and I live at the corner of South Railroad and Hatchery, and I've been living there since the 70s. And the year I moved in, it was a very spectacular Powers Creek display of high water. Uh, was in my side yard, and Eric Omkos was running around, and we were trying to help him get his stuff inventory out up high so the water wouldn't destroy it.
Thank you, Frank.
Hi, I'm Margot Whitcomb, and I live on G Street, and the creek is in between our house and our garage.
Wow. Thank you. You're in it.
Is over the creek.
A river runs through it.
I'm Kit Mann, and next to me, the Glens. Between us, we have the longest private frontage on the creek in Blue Lake.
Thank you, Kit.
Hi, I'm David Glenn. In January of last year, um, the creek was the water on my property was about 4 feet deep in the backyard and about 6 or 7 feet deep in the front yard.
Thank you, David.
I'm Lynn Glenn, and I live there too.
Thank you, Lynn. And we'll keep going back to the crowd because there's a few people we missed over here, and then we'll do the group of people at the table up here. Want to get everyone to introduce themselves.
I'm Elise Scafani. I'm also a member of the city council. I live on the creek that runs along Railroad, and I flooded last year for the first time in 25 years. So that was not fun, and I'm interested in what's going on with Powers Creek.
Thank you for being here tonight, Elise.
I'm Tim Broadman. I live in Fieldbrook, and I'm an active board member of the Bottlewatt Watershed Council.
Thank you, Tim. And we'll start here with Mike.
Hello, Mike Fogut. I live in Blue Lake. I'm the city engineer, and I'm going to lead the engineering. I'm the PM on the engineering team for the project.
I'm Dave Farrell, Ottawa Watershed Council.
Don Allen, Ottawa Watershed Council. Jeff Anderson, principal engineer with Northern Hydrology. I'm Mike Malone. I'm on S10 design team with NHG.
Can you all be louder? It's really
Okay, let's start with. Did y'all hear Don Allen? Okay, let's start from Jeff.
She said that very well. Don Allen, Ottawa Watershed Council. I'm not sure the microphone's on.
They don't amplify; they're just for recording.
It's just
okay.
Sorry, I did like 2 hours of presentation. Voice is kind of gone, but Jeff Anderson, full engineer with Northern Hydrology. We were brought in to help with the actual design of the stream section.
Okay.
And Mike Malone with SHN on the design site.
Gary Reese with SHN. I work as a consulting city planner.
Joseph Saylor with SHN. I'm the biologist doing the planting plan.
I'm Rose Patnod. I'm a senior water resources engineer with Northern Hydrology and Engineering. I've been working on the design for the channel.
I'm Mandy Mager. I'm the city manager for the city of Blue Lake. I'm also a Blue Lake resident, and my family actually used to own the Glenn's property, the Eslo's property, and the Mann's property. So we're very familiar with the creek and have spent a lot of time as a kid playing on it, fishing it, and excited to see the creek get returned to some semblance of its natural habitat. So.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate everyone who helped get the word out to the community to make this a successful meeting. You look around the room, this is the community that is shaping the future of Powers Creek. And the primary goal of the project, I'm going to read it straight from the grant. Powers Creek Restoration Project will plan the restoration of 2,950 feet of Powers Creek to improve salmonid habitat, reduce the frequency of nuisance flood events, and engage the community in the city of Blue Lake. Well, here we are, folks. I'm going to go ahead and jump down to the meeting ground rules just to help us go along. We all know these rules. We use them all the time, but sometimes we need to just kind of be reminded. So we'll start with listen to presentations. We have a couple of them tonight. Raise hands to be recognized for clarifying questions. Stay on track. Keep comments or questions on this project and work towards win-win solutions and respect all community members. Real simple, 5 rules. I'm going to hand it off to Rose now to get going.
All right. So as Jeff said, we were brought in by SHN to work on the channel restoration design. Part of the design is to look at the nuisance flooding that's happening within the community. As you guys know, last January 13th, you guys had a very extreme event. I think it was a 15-year event on the Mad River, and it was pretty extreme to see. I saw some of the video at Trevor's house and have gone out and surveyed some of the high water marks at Kit and David's house as well. I know that the that the brewery flooded, and we have some of the high water marks during that time as well for Mike Fogut going out and taking photos while it was peaking. So we are aware. We have been, in communication with community members, and I think that this project started out as a fisheries restoration design, and has benefits for the creek in other ways. Its geomorphic function, and in turn, looking at trying to reduce nuisance flooding. So some background, you folks who were here during the 30% design have seen some of these slides before. I'm going to go back for everyone else as well. Lower Powers Creek was actually, do we have a pointer by any chance? No? Okay, I'll just kind of point up here. Lowers Power, I'll just, yeah, that's all right. Take this. I can take this with me, it's all right. This is cordless. Lowers Powers Creek historically came down and through into the North Fork of the Mad River in this direction. In 1941, you can see that the creek was channelized across what was soon to be a log pond, and moved further downstream into the river system. The river itself used to be braided. It was completely different than it is today. So there's a lot of different things that are going on with Powers Creek for why it would be flooding like the way it is right now. The blue line is the 1941 channel. The red line is approximately the present channel alignment. You can see that it is a lot more channelized, as that it's been straightened, even from the time that they moved the channel down the stream. And that's largely that people develop in the floodplain, and we all like to be in the nice flat. You are awesome, thank you. In the nice flat loamy soils of the river, and by doing that we encroach upon the creek, and then the creek has to be channelized to be able to accommodate people living there. Here's a picture from April 9th, 1947, shot by Schuster. You can see Applewood Lane, which goes down to huh?
Sometimes they don't put the screens.
Oh, okay.
Applewood didn't exist.
Okay.
Applewood didn't get until.
Well, then there was a lane that was not Applewood Lane, which is approximately where it is now. Okay, thank you. Which has been developed since then, but you guys are aware of the location. To just kind of orient yourselves, here's Hatchery Road. You can see that the creek was coming down underneath the building, and through here, there was a much wider floodplain. It wasn't as developed right at that culvert where it's coming out. Came into riparian forest, and this is where it was channelized. You can see that the forest was still intact. That's approximately where it was historically, but this is where it was channelized for where the future log pond can be seen. Oh, in front of their house. Yeah, in front of their house. Yeah. So the channel was brought downstream on the Mad River. Historically, it came across the floodplain this way. It was filled. The log pond, this whole landing was created for, timber operations, and they developed a log pond right here. So, one of the things that we'll be talking about is the channel's bed. The channel bed being the gravels and the sand and the dirt that comes down the channel. And as you lengthen a channel, you give it it needs more energy for it to move its channel bed. So that's a sort of fundamental thought to think about when we change the way that a system works. Okay. In the late 1940s, Lower Powers Creek was realigned, channelized, and stripped of vegetation to make way for the McIntosh Mill. It has been in this degraded condition since, and has greatly filled in with non-native invasive species. Joseph here from SHN, he's a botanist, and he'll talk about a revegetation plan, and he has a really great perspective in terms of like where the system, the vegetation system of Powers Creek is, and how it is sort of stuck, right? It's sort of stuck, and it can't really turn into cottonwoods and redwoods, what you would expect upon like a creek like this, being choked down with willows and Himalayan blackberry and some of the other species that have colonized there. So some downstream restoration work that was done, the Blue Lake Rancheria, through a tribal wildlife grant from the Fish and Wildlife Service, was able to restore a section of Powers Creek and put in a bridge across Gary Johnston's property. You also know as Pepe. What was there before was a concreted a bridge that held the channel. So there was a huge plunge pool at the outlet of it. I think it dropped like 6-7 feet, and fish couldn't get up there. They were able to rip out the concrete, replace the bridge, and open up Powers Creek for fish passage. So the proposed fish habitat restoration project that we're working on will restore the creek from the new bridge up to the culverts at Hatchery and Railroad roads. That's fun to say. So here's another view looking downstream right after the project was completed. So our project goals and objectives that Dave went through, this is kind of another way to say it, is that we're here to restore salmon in riparian habitats in Lower Powers Creek and increase the abundance of coho salmon and steelhead populations in the Mad River. In addition, this project will improve flow conveyance and geomorphic function. Some of the objectives that we have is to improve channel morphology, create and enhance fisheries habitat, and establish a multi-storage native species riparian corridor. Yes, Lynn, can you wait until we're done with the presentation, my section, until we have questions? Sure, absolutely. So what do you need definition for? Sure. Geomorphology. Geomorphology is a study of the channel shape and how it changes through processes such as, like a flood being like an every year flood. So you have like 100-year flood. That's not really going to change the way that the channel is shaped. But you have an every single year flood or every other year flood. And when that channel fills up to the top, we call that bank full. And that bank full system carries a certain amount of bed load and suspended load, which is the rocks and the sand that are moving through the system. So geomorphology, fluvial geomorphology, referring to a river, fluvial, is looking at that process itself and how that system is changing. Geomorphology can be an explanation of a whole landscape. What we're looking at is fluvial geomorphology. Okay? Yeah. Thank you. So you guys know where you're at. This is your creek. This is Blue Lake. So here's Powers Creek in its existing condition. This was our 30% grading boundary. This is what we started with when we came into the project. We looked at the project and we said, okay, what can we do within this stream corridor? And we, kind of drew a line around it, did a grading plan, had 8 to 10 foot inset benches. And we had kind of like an idea, a thumbprint on a starting place of how to design this channel. Come on in if you want. There's still seats up here. Okay. Within the 30% design phase, we talked to the adjacent landowners to the creek, and we realized that that our project was encroaching in a way that they did not want us to onto their property. So we have adjusted our grading plan for our 65% design, where we have pulled in our project off of areas where we were asked to not cross over into people's property. And so essentially, these are the big changes that we've done between the 30 and the 65% design. It's a good song. Some other ideas that we had, we were going to set back a levee into the horse arena so that we could put in a meander bend here. The city has kind of come back to us and asked us not to do that. The city's in the process of putting together an industrial park within this area, so we had to kind of sneak back over away from that. And then there's also a new bike track here as well. So our plan that we had in 30% was a little bit too large, which is, we were thinking big. So now we're trying to kind of scale back, but still have the system work. So this is what we're looking at. I'm going to be showing you guys gradation maps, which are kind of nice to see. These are elevation maps and it's a good representation of how things are situated within the landscape. So the creek here, this is our base map. We started out with a LiDAR data set that was flown in 2011. It was really great out on the floodplain, but within the creek corridor, we had points that were outside the riparian, and then the LiDAR points couldn't penetrate through the riparian cover because it's very, very, very thick. And so we also had like pretty good points right down the center of the channel where it opens up. And so when they went to go and process the data, they took all the trees out, and we had a surface which was about 50 feet wide, maybe wider. It was the floodplain down to the point of the channel. And we're like, this is not good. We can't actually model this. We can't, evaluate, a grading plan. So we went out, we and SHN primarily went out there with their surveyors and surveyed cross sections up and down the channel as we do, and improved this surface so that we could do some computer modeling, mathematical modeling to look at the hydraulics over time. And here's our 65% design. So let me see if I. Yes. So we'll go
So
through
good to
this.
see.
I'm gonna get right to it. So what we're looking at, some of the major features of this design, which you can't see on this level, I'll go through some cross sections so that you guys can see, and you'll look at the revegetation plan as well. Thank you. um, but essentially what we're doing is through Gary Johnston's property, where we do have a little bit more space to be able to put in inset floodplains, we are designing it as it was within the 30% design, where we do have 8 to 10 foot inset floodplains, pools, wood, all the bells and whistles to create, a very channelized, but as good of a channel in terms of fisheries habitat as we can do within a very tight system. Okay. As we come up into the top of Gary's property, as it crosses over into the city's property, we're putting in a large meander bend. This is the original channel here. This is the existing channel. There's an alcove here, and this is a vegetated medial bar. And this is a high flow channel. And so this is the type of habitat that fish really like. It has an area where, they can go off channel if the creek is rushing through, and have another area to kind of rest and have what we call refugia. So that is what this part of the project is right here. As it comes up into Kit and David's property, it's a little bit more tightened, but it can still transport flood flows and move through. We've put in a couple of pools where we can, but again, it's very, very linear and simplified through this area. Here's the bridge. This is the Eslos property right here. Again, we're staying outside of you guys' property boundaries, so that we're working within this area. Underneath the bridge, the city has water and sewer. We're looking at that as part of this project as well, as we're moving forward into kind of finalizing our designs. And as it comes up into this backwater that goes back into, we call it, the South Fork, the railroad backwater, out in that comes back and floods into this area here. We're trying to kind of connect these two, the main channel into the backwaters with a low floodplain that kind of tilts back into the channel. This is a pie in the sky design. We're still going with it. We're trying to work with the landowner to see whether or not this is feasible. And we're continuing to just move forward with this design as it is right now. Okay. So to look at that within you guys' landscape, you can see the aerial photograph and how this all kind of sits within Blue Lake. I put on the contour lines, which kind of highlight the pools within the system and kind of pops out where that medial island is. And I even have, I put back on the APNs, the parcel boundaries as well, so that you can see them in relationship to the design. Just a second, we're almost to the end of the presentation, then we'll take some questions.
Thank you for holding, John.
Yeah. So this is an engineered, longitudinal profile. What this is essentially is that this is the channel bed. And as we look at the bed as it is right now, we're looking at lowering the bed elevation of the channel, digging it out, digging it down. One of the things that we've been able to observe within the time that we've been working on this project is that at the culvert at Railroad Avenue, within the time that LIDAR was flown, and also Cal Poly Humboldt students went out and surveyed, so we have very consistent information. The channel itself has come up by a foot within that time. So what we're doing is we're tying into how it was in 20. So we're not digging down super deep up here. We don't want to create a head cut that goes up, in through, the upstream area. But we are bringing it down to a base elevation that we know existed in 2011. And from there, we're coming down, putting in a series of pools as we can. This big cut here is going into that meander bed, and we have a large pool there. And then there's a whole series of pools downstream of that. Okay.
And just for clarity, the dash line is existing and the solid line is our proposed. So you can see we're lowering it.
Yeah, we're lowering the channel. So here, these are what we call cross sections. Like essentially we're looking at the same thing, but across the channel, so that we can kind of see what does this look like across the channel. So at cross section 1, and I'll kind of show you again, we have one. Here, use this to point with. We have one. It's my finger to point with. Cross section that's down on Gary's property that goes through a pool. So I'll show you guys what that looks like. It's kind of a typical cross section through a pool through his property. They all kind of look similar. We have a cross section that goes through this medial island here in the high flow channel, and then also this meander bed. We have a cross section that I think is on your property right here. Looks similar to the ones that are on your property, just so that you know, where we're having a restriction from the landowner, which is fine. And you can see how we tie right into, their existing channel inset floodplain that already exists there. And then upstream on Boughton's property, this is our lowered floodplain. And this part of the project was put in particularly to deal with some of the flooding that pops out right here on Charton and goes down the road.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah, and we know that that's sort of the weak point within the flooding.
Happening there too on the street.
What's that? Okay, sorry. Yeah, we'll talk later. Just a minute.
We're almost there.
Almost there. So here's the cross section that's down on Gary's property. This is through a pool, so it's a little bit deeper. Downstream of the pool, we have what's called a riffle, and it would be higher where the pool tails out and pours out into the channel. But you can see that it's deeper here through a pool. It's got inset floodplains, so that as the pool fills up and waters rise, it can flood within the floodplains here and not up into the active, like larger floodplain. Outside of the channel. The channel has been widened, the channel has been deepened quite a bit. You can see through Gary's property. Okay. Here's cross section 2 through the medial bar. You can see here, this is the main channel on this side. Here's the bar. Here's the high flow channel with an alcove on this side. The alcove is just that little backwater pool. And it's designed in there for fisheries refugia. So here's cross section 3. This is on your property. We're tying into.
That's
all right.
Everyone get up and find a chair.
So good. This is so good. Okay. So the project limit on this side is your property boundary. Okay. So within outside of the property boundary, cutting down below the channel, the channel itself is moved into out towards the trail. Okay. And into remove a portion of the bank here in order to accommodate this channel. Okay. And then upstream, you can see that we're widening the channel and we're putting in this lowered floodplain. giving the creek itself some room, some relief, some room to spread out and to flood into a larger area instead of kind of being pinched in and pushing over into Charton Road. This is our surface volumes. Part of the project will be looking at where to where to place this material that is excavated. There'll be some vegetation clearing that will be more of duff and soil, and then the excavation that's below a foot of depth. That will be probably more like channel material. I could imagine that part of this channel is going to be very gravelly, and then probably there would be like a section that would where it has been channelized that may even just be loam. So we'll be probably looking at that as well. All right, I'm going to pass this over to Joseph, who is our botanist.
Okay,
He
before
works at the
Joseph starts,
SHN.
though, let's have questions for
Oh.
Rose real quick. I know
Okay.
John had his hand up, so I appreciate you waiting, John. And also, I want to recognize Rose's meticulous work that she's done. I mean, not just Rose, the whole team, but she knows where every stick is, I think, on every rock. It's John.
The slide said 65%. 65%.
Of 100% design. So as an engineer, we stop at different points in our design. We stop at 30%. We're 30% to the end. And we're going to look at our concepts. We're going to look at our design, and we're going to bring it back to the landowners. We may bring it back to our funder. We talk amongst ourselves. We say, let's look at our design. And let's evaluate it. Are there flaws? Are there some critical flaws that will make this infeasible? Are there ways that we can find solutions and work other things into it? Like, this person doesn't want us on our property. Okay, let's change the design in the 65% design. 65 is a little random, I know, but it's how the system works.
Mike
Yeah.
has some
John,
additional information.
part of the grant is at certain points of the design process, we had to do submittals.
Yeah.
So this is like a break. We did the 30%, the conceptual, and from that we got feedback primarily from adjacent landowners, kind of modified and tweaked the design. So, this part in terms of the model on here, we're close to the end of that. Now it's really getting into details, getting feedback from the agency. So we just submitted this package last week to the funding agency.
Yeah, so it's on Jack Christie's desk at Department of Water Resources. He's the engineer there that's going to review everything. He'll send comments while we're also going through the permitting process. Yes.
The grade, the slope, is steep as it comes through town. Then it gets flat. But really, Mad River is going to control it by the floodwaters down there. So is the floodwaters of Mad River really slow everything down? So how long is all this going to last, and is not just going to silt in because of Mad River?
Excellent question. The location where the channel actually empties into the Mad River is full of fine sediment. And if you go down and you walk the channel all the way out to the mouth, it's full of fine sediment. It is a grade control for sure. It does control the grade. There is also from the project that was done with the bridge, there's an incision where it's down cutting right now from the bridge up through Gary Johnston's property. I've seen it happen over the last couple of years as the head cut is moving upstream. There are different grade controls within a channel. Channels are not like this. They have all these little kinks on them. Okay, we have an overall slope of the channel, which is 0.06 feet per foot. And then we have, different points where, maybe a log is set down and it's creating some type of a barrier and it's scouring. There's going to be different points within the channel that are grade controls. We'll be installing grade control as well. Like the bottom of a culvert would be a grade control as well. I don't think that we're dealing with that up until we get to the boulevard. But
it's a good point, though.
You're absolutely correct that the base of the channel down at the Mad River is the grade control for the entire system. It doesn't take away what's happening internally within the creek, but there are limitations. You can't go there's usually like an angle of repose based upon the type of material that is within the channel bed. So we are watching an incision cut up right now. It's stopped. It's one location. It will probably continue on its own if we just walk away. It will not solve you guys' problem. If you walk down below the bridge at Monda Way over the pedestrian bridge, there's a lot of sediment that's sitting there. It's very, very, very flat.
Okay.
But again, part of our goal is to open up the channel and make it deeper, trying to work with the physics of the system to be able to create what we would call like a equilibrium where we can be able to move bed material.
So
through as well.
I see Karina and Martin and Jeff has one comment also to add to
Yes.
this topic. And if we want to get into the details, John, I'm sure we can arrange a meeting separate to get further into the details. But for tonight, we have limited time.
Yeah, one thing I'll add is this creek, like I've seen a lot of small systems, is it's been taken over through invasive vegetation, and that is probably the big driver for the sedimentation.
Yeah.
And so we're going to kind of reset the strategy, is sort of reset the system, including the vegetation. It's going to require maintenance, so we don't go right back to where we were. But like any, this is an urban creek, and it's any system, anything we build needs maintenance, and creeks need them too. And so this will be kind of a long-term project.
Okay, I saw Karina's hand before Martin, so if it's okay going in that order. Okay.
You guys just like waiting to ask asked it. So to be perfectly candid, I've been in the creek a lot in between a couple of the floods near flood and flood that we had this past few months. And so every day I walk that circle, so I've been monitoring it when it's flowing, but also getting in there when it's not. And myself and some friends have opened up some pretty significant jams that have been in there, just lifting that stuff up out of there so the creek can move. And I've been really pleased to see, just by the creek being able to move more fluidly through, that the channel is changing, and it changes really quickly between storms. Just the sediment load, how it deposits, and I've been studying a bit about fluvial geomorphology, so I can understand this system, how it works. There's one place in particular that I'm sure everybody is aware of, is at the footbridge. It's very narrow there, and I didn't hear you say anything about dealing with that, because there's, over this last year, especially since it flooded last January, and then again this last December, um, there's a lot of deposit right there on the east side of the bridge. It just keeps growing, and then there's a narrow channel, and it's moving through there now. But I'm wondering, and then I heard that is there a sewer line or something under there? So it's complicated. There's a bridge, so there's limitations on what can happen now that there's a bridge there. And so I wonder how that fits into your proposal as far as dealing with that particular
Mike's going to answer
spot.
your question, Karina.
Yeah, no. So yeah, actually in our design package, it's not in what we presented, but we do look at they're both obviously water's pumped, but the sewer line is a lift station. It's a force main, so that's pumped too. It's not gravity. So we're basically going to lower both lines to accommodate for deepening of the channel.
So you'll be actually moving it in and deepening that, like we saw with
Yeah.
the bridge further down by the
Exactly.
Rancheria.
It's all going to be deeper and wider. If that answers your question, can we move on to Martin? Thank you, Karina. And Karina has been doing some incredible work out there too. Oh, Jeff. Okay, we're going to move on to Martin. Okay, go. Okay, great. Anyone else have questions at this point? I do want to point out that we do have this PowerPoint we can make into a PDF. So anyone who would like a copy of that, you can reach through me at info@BottleWateRatershed.council.org. You all should have my email. You can find me on the web too. So
Just add, if I could start, we see the sign up sheet around earlier. We could just ask people with late arrivals to maybe put their names on the back.
I've got another one here. So Tim can hand this around. And there's a pen here. So we want to get all your contacts. Anyone who wants information, we want to share that with you. So
Quick.
yes, one more question.
You mentioned something about a levee near the arena that is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Was that to enable a widening there?
We were when you first approach a project, you put in as much habitat as you possibly can, and then you deal with the restrictions and incorporate that into the design. The meander bend that was um, located within the 30% design would have to push back the levee into the arena. It has been removed to be able to leave the levee as it is. Okay.
We really appreciate all the good questions and everyone's focused attention. We're going to turn it over to Joseph now. Everyone take a deep breath and let it go.
Ah. Well, thank you all for being here. As I mentioned earlier, I did the revegetation plan, and we've touched on a few of the important aspects of why we need a good revegetation plan. Just starting with the existing conditions, the stream, as anybody who's walked it, is extremely choked with vegetation. Some of that is native willows. A lot of that is Himalayan blackberry. And what we see in these systems is the Himalayan blackberry uses the willows as a trellis to grow up and over and to spread, and then it sets its roots down and it spreads. Especially in intermittent streams where you don't have summer flows, Himalayan berry loves that. So we have a system that's very choked. Another problem with that is, like it was mentioned earlier, it's stuck. There's no room for seedlings of other native trees to get started. There's just such dense cover, nothing can grow through that. You don't have wildlife moving through there. It's basically at a stasis where Himalayan blackberry is dominant. And maybe you have some willow growth that they'll fall over and then they'll grow back over time. What that does, as was mentioned earlier, is it creates a blockage to water movement. Specifically, it captures sediment within this system. That's all based on the Himalayan blackberry. What also happens is that it then roots in that sediment and traps it in place. So that's where we're at right now. So we have two things that we want to do. We want to create habitat. That's like a big focus. We also want to create habitat that's not conducive for invasives. So here's the goals, and I'll just read them off for you. You can read them for yourself as well. But we want to establish a native riparian forest. Forest areas with shading, not good for Himalayan blackberry, not good for the species that are choking that channel. We want to put trees, shrubs, and forbs, all native, which will hamper the growth of invasives. Integral to making this thing.
I'm sorry,
Forbs like herbaceous species.
Like a grass.
Yep, grasses. Yep. So we want to make sure that we're cognizant of what kind of habitat zones we have on the stream. You can't plant upland species down in the stream channel or stream species up at the top of the bank. So designing this thing so that it mimics what we see in nature so that it succeeds. Oftentimes you see species put in the wrong places and then you have high mortality rates. We want to avoid that. Obviously, before we do any planting, remove invasives. As you saw in one of the earlier slides, we have a lot of material that we need to take out of there. About a foot of soil needs to be removed to capture all of the root material from the Himalayan blackberry. It's a very aggressive species. And we got to go all in to get rid of it. And then the last thing is we got to monitor it. You can do all this work and plant a bunch of trees and then walk away and they all die and then we're right back to where we were. So what we want to incorporate into this project is a long-term monitoring plan so that we have success.
And maintenance.
So yes, and maintenance. So part of the monitoring it informs our maintenance. So we know what do we need to do. So here's a concept of what we would like to see. This should mimic what you would see on a stream of this size with the hydrology that we experience at Powers Creek. Basically, hardwoods right along the channel, and then a mix into conifer hardwood, and then conifers at the edge. We have to do evergreen species to keep the Himalayan berry out. So that's integral to the success of this project. And then we have the understory of primarily evergreen species, again, for the same purpose. Next slide. So here's the different zones. Like I was saying, we need to put the right species in the right place. Here are the zones that we have. They're mostly based on hydrology and proximity to the channel. That takes into account root depth, what can the trees handle, so we have a healthy system. Again, we've taken what you saw on the grading plan earlier. That's what we're planting. We have a few expanded areas where the city owns the parcels, and we're putting native plants in there so that we can enhance the habitat there. We're not doing any ground disturbance other than removing the invasives. We also are interested in having more invasives removed on other people's property if so interested, but that's another conversation. So existing conditions, we already kind of touched on this. Just wanted to show you this is a picture from the lower bridge at the very low end of the project. You got the willows, you got the Himalayan blackberry growing up into those willows. This is a response to disturbance. This type of habitat you see in like abandoned industrial sites where a stream is moving through and it was channelized. So typical along the coast, a response to disturbance. And like I said earlier, this is kind of a climax in these systems without an intervention of some sort. So I want to give some examples. This was one of the first, it's okay, first restoration projects done in Humboldt County. This was done in 95. This was Janes Creek. A little bit different hydrology wise, but the condition of the stream was very similar. This was completely choked in Himalayan blackberry, bank to bank, that whole area. They came in, they planted trees. This was like the real early days of restoration. And there wasn't really any understory put in there. We want to do this. We want to do it with understory. And I think this looks really nice. You have shaded channel. You have the ability for large wood to get introduced into the channel. You have a healthy system. It's keeping Himalayan blackberry. You can actually see the wall of Himalayan blackberry on the side there, and you don't see it encroaching into the system. So what we would like to see is that same overstory, but with an understory of native shrubs and herbs. Again, the purpose is to create a barrier to invasives and also a visual barrier. I know that was some concerns that we had heard amongst the community members. We would like to accommodate that and provide visual barrier with proper plantings. And then we have a couple other pictures of streams that are similar. Coastal area, understory with an overstory of native hardwoods mixed with conifer trees. And then this is another urban stream, same thing, conifers at the edge, native hardwoods along the stream channel, and native herbaceous species along the stream channel. Again, visual barrier. Yeah, you can go to the next one. Same thing, this was a stream that was restored. I know that you can speak more on this 20 years ago, and the overstory is completely intact. It's totally overshadowing the stream. And you can see there's a little bit of introduction of wood into the system, but as you see here, it's not choked. The water's moving through, and you have good habitat. That is the goal of our revegetation plan on Powers Creek. And that's it for the re-veg. Happy to discuss.
Questions? Yes, Lisa. Wait, is it Lisa? Yeah.
It is, yeah.
I'm so glad to hear about the revegetation part of it, and because in my work, the blackberry is just, oh my God. So, and also I learned that that it doesn't contribute to the invertebrates or anything like that.
Correct.
Leaf litter, there's no leaf. The leaf litter is like granted, evergreens have their role, like you're describing, to create the shade and create the invasives, but the leaf litter of the shrubs and vegetation that you're describing feeds the invertebrates, which in turn the ecology, the system. So thank you. One question I have is, you talked about monitoring and maintenance. I also know you don't just do this once and walk away.
Right.
No, you don't. And so I'm just wondering about the potential for funding for that. And if you could talk, and also the seed source that y'all are going to use to, like, I don't know if you're getting the cottonwood and
Our
whatnot,
desire
and
is
the
to
nursery.
source everything as close to the project site as possible.
Okay, and then it'll be
Mhm.
grown out somewhere, like
Yes.
with some of the
Samara.
There's
Samara.
and then also Blue Lake Rancheria has a
Oh,
nursery that they're
cool.
developing. So yeah, it'll be right here. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
thank you. So many thoughtful questions tonight. Any
As far
others?
as funding for monitoring, I don't have an answer at this point.
So yeah, to
Yeah.
address your questions about funding. So this is a Department of Water Resources funded planning grant that was once upon a time an implementation grant, but about a year and a half ago they said you guys aren't going to have enough time to finish and implement. And I'm so glad they said that because we're running down to the last 5 months now and we're at 65% design. Just one moment. And so with the plan, since Prop 4 was funded, DWR has told us we're green lighted for implementation. So we're working our butts off over here to get to that finish line in June. Martin, yes.
And it will include a monitoring plan. We are developing a monitoring and maintenance plan with this
Mhm.
project.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
just so grateful that.
Yeah, and so the
Yeah.
plan is to roll into implementation as quick as possible. We don't know if it's going to happen 25 fall, but definitely 26. Martin.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this from like a recreational perspective, thinking about
You parks people.
not 100% work for CFW.
Oh, well, okay.
We're PR outreach.
Okay, okay.
Thinking about educational potential of the site and viewing places along the way where people can see some of the restoration work that's been done, and wondering if y'all could consider putting in some interpretive signs.
Would you be would you consult with us as a volunteer on the committee? That'd be great. That'd be great.
Thank
We'd
you.
love to have that.
It is part of the plan
Yeah,
that we have
yeah.
right now.
But
It's,
it'd be nice to have his
it's,
input.
it's not an extensive interpretive sign plan, but we have at least a plan for one interpretive sign, at least to explain the project.
And it'd be great to have your input because you are kind of an expert. A little bit. Yeah. Karina.
Well, I was just wondering how you imagine the maintenance of this, because obviously it'll take many years as the overstory grows. It'll take 10, 15, yeah. And I mean, I've been talking to people about how we might be able to, and I've talked a little bit with you, David,
Yeah,
about
yeah.
having some kind of, that we could work with you as a community,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
a maintenance,
You're an MVP on that team.
And yeah, but so yeah, and my next door neighbor is a crew leader for CCC, and we've discussed that a bit, and so
And we've got Rose here who's with PwC, and we're looking at her down the road to work on that. So
because as we all know, blackberry, the Himalayan berries are
Mhm.
delicious, and they do go away eventually, but they don't ever completely go away.
They never completely go away.
Forever.
Yep.
And building
Yep.
that into this community sort of repertoire of stewardship of this area with your,
And that's key. What you're mentioning there is key, is getting the community involved. That's you guys.
Yeah.
Because the battle against invasives is never over. You might have a bird bring in something new.
Yeah, nothing's
that
gonna
needs to be
happen
addressed.
without this group here. And just to touch to your point, my first time I dipped my toes into restoration was in 1983 on Adobe Creek, which was a tributary to the Petaluma River. The project's still being maintained by the Casa Grande United Anglers, which we started back in 1983. So these projects, these urban projects, are very important for bringing everyone together. We're going to be working with the school here. Rose has already outreached to the school a couple of times. We're working on that. So yeah, it's something to bring us together.
If I could just add to that, that was actually something that we specified in our DWR grant application, is that there would be community outreach, sorry, not outreach.
Wait, that's the other meaning, yeah.
I'm trying to say outreach and engagement. Got a little too quick there. Anyway, the idea being is that we would be organizing community volunteers to help with vegetation maintenance after the project, because the funding sources won't fund that kind of work. You know, they expect us to contribute back to the project. They expect the city of Blue Lake, the community, to volunteer basically, or give something back, contribute to the project. So the community volunteers will be definitely a big part of that, along with education and outreach.
It's too bad Michael Fields isn't in the audience tonight, because here's some really good quotes that we've already got. There's community outrage. It's complicated and we need an intervention. So there we are. Yes, Lisa. Oh, okay. Thank you. I forgot your name. Karen. Thank you.
I'm sorry for going out the first meeting to the country. But our property starts at the east side of the arena and then ends up Charter Road. And so the creek runs the whole range of that. We have a berm though, and we're talking about pulling out all the native species and stuff. The berm is just dirt, and it's like 5 feet. And what's happening now with that berm is that we've got gophers, and so with the creek at the wintertime, it's coming through the berm itself. And so I'm curious. I know you're doing, the west side of where we are, but what is going to happen
What does it look like when we're in implementation? Rose, do you want to address this, or?
The opposite banking about.
I can say one thing.
Are you guys on Potter's Lane? Okay.
That's right.
Just want to clarify.
Yeah, right next to
You guys are
Frank's
adjacent to the
Frank's
city
property,
so you're the
just
last
downstream of that.
Potter's Lane?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I understand where you guys
Basically, goes from Potter's Lane to wraps around the doors.
Right.
And
So
the water just goes through there like a sieve, right? When it gets to a certain point. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. So
The city, they got some structures and trees at the top.
First of all, the stream bed is going to be deeper and it's going to be wider. And so water will tend to catch in that and be conveyed downstream. But Rose has studied this in great detail.
Joseph was going to go first.
I just wanted to say one thing. We're removing the invasives, like we said. Just one thing to note about those invasives is while they do lock in sediment within a more of a flatter system, their roots are actually pretty dispersed and they don't hold vertical very well. And they don't hold very well against like direct abrasion. So some of the species that we're planning on putting in there are more rhizomatous, have more of netted root systems, the idea behind that is that we will um, limit erosion on steeper banks that we want to have in place.
Biologic.
Yes.
A root structure.
Yeah.
People planted ivy.
I was wondering about that.
That's the worst.
I was wondering about that because it was like a
It's
net.
bad.
Yeah.
I don't know, we try to keep it off and it's like out of control.
And does
Yeah.
it go all the way down to the creek channel?
It's a willow.
Okay.
It's just, it's like awful.
Yeah.
Try
Yeah.
to keep it out and it's
That's gonna be really hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
I'm worried about not keeping it out and what happens with the bird.
Yeah, ivy's notorious because it basically creates a net over the surface with very little roots into the soil below, and no other plants can grow up. So what you'll see is the net will be there and it's eroding underneath. Yep.
Well,
So we want to get rid of that. You roll it up, you get rid of it, and then you go back and you keep pulling it out every year because it's tenacious. Yep. It's a really horrible.
okay, so we're gonna move on unless there's more. Oh, two more. Okay, I saw Lynn and then yeah. So we got Lynn and then we got Lisa.
As a person who depends on the vegetation between us and the industrial park, but also as a trail walker. So I'm just wondering, so I walk the trail daily, what will we see year one as a walking the trail? And then year two, and it's got to you have really beautiful evergreen, but they take a long time to grow.
Do.
What year is that? You know, so what will it look like to the community as we
Mhm.
use this area a lot for
Yeah.
recreation?
So there will be temporal impacts to the view. Temporal is just like there's a time difference between what we see here. This is about year 10, year 15, somewhere in that range. You have a fence of about 6 feet on the far side there as a reference. So there are temporal impacts to the view shed. This project will be implemented in 3 phases, so it won't be just all gone at one time. So you will have a little bit of a break in that way, but there's no way to plant these trees and get successful growth with what's there now. It has to be removed. So what the best picture I can have here is we're trying to mimic like a big flood event coming through and just wiping the slate clean. And now we're restarting succession on this site. Succession is just basically a natural movement through different vegetation types on the landscape. Right now we're stuck, like I had mentioned. So we have to remove everything to allow these species to grow. Otherwise they won't. It's going to look like what you see at the downstream edge for probably 5 years. And that's, I mean, we're going to have a lot more herbaceous
So
species.
David, I know that there was one other person. Lisa was next, I think. So we come back to David. I just want to be doing order. Oh,
Mhm.
Rose has more to add. Okay, all right.
Guys, your property, one of the things that you guys are willing to remove invasives off of your property, then let's say that we start construction downstream in an area that isn't across from you folks. We could be looking at trying to phase a project, you know, as we're writing grants and as we're trying to get the funding, that if you guys are agreeable to removing the invasive species off your property sooner, then those trees at your property and the shrubs, the twinberry, the myrtle, the things that are hard to see through, can be released sooner, so that as we're breathing along the edge of your property boundary, you guys already have a thicker screen. Okay, so that is
already planted.
yeah.
The trail walk. walk, or what will you see? What will the community be, should be, they be
And
understanding?
then probably people see the creek.
Yeah, you will see the
You'll
creek.
There's gonna be
Just
people.
gravy
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna happen.
baby plants.
And
Okay,
one
so
thing is we're not going to have bare dirt. There will be
I see
native
plans back to
seating
Lisa.
on the whole site because
Gotcha, but
we don't
after
want that.
Lisa. You're next after. Oh, so it's Lisa, David, Roxanne.
Joseph,
Yeah.
what are some of the tools or mechanisms that you're going to use for, let's say, the BlackBerry, and there's also some, besides the ID2, because I didn't know about maintenance, was it manual or heavy equipment?
Fifth graders from the middle. No, just kidding.
Just,
Yeah, it's like, because you did mention the need to go down
Yep.
into the soil to get some of the
yeah. So those the method for future like maintenance of the site will there's different ways of removing Himalayan. We'll probably know more as we see how this thing is doing. So if we have like big reinfestation problems going on, we have to use different methods. And if it's like a couple of individuals here, where we could send some fifth graders out there, not saying that we will, but
That actually, I wasn't joking. They are going to be
okay, fifth
yeah.
graders, pull away.
Rose has been working with the school. We've had them out before, and there'll be community.
You have to get the roots out.
Rub those roots out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Manually, it's still, that's why I wondered about the use of
Yep.
possibly having
Yeah.
but it is in a riparian, so I mean that raises a lot of
Right.
questions.
So a lot of that will be further investigated as we see what problems we have.
All right. So
a lot
one,
of geotechnical fabric that you can also use to control some of the cases.
I think they use that at Prairie Creek, right? Yeah.
Try to use it at Passus Flat, gas, Blackberry's coming up to it.
Yeah.
Okay, David, I think next.
Okay, my question leads off of what Karen was talking about, the berm. We have a berm that runs down ours that was created back in the late 40s. And the berm is constructed of rock about yay big, and there's quite a lot of them, so you've got a structure, and then you have what's developed on top of it is a little layer of dirt, and then this duff layer over the top. So this year, after the flooding this year, I've been in there trying to do sandbagging and trying to build up, because I was able during that flooding to get out in there and kind of identify where the low parts were. But I'm thinking long term, my solution isn't very good. That it somehow it needs to be, I need to have a different structure for that berm over the top, because I can go in and I can clear it down to what looks like good to me. I put the sandbags over it, and if the water is up there within a few inches of the back, it's coming through the thing, because those rocks, the large rocks and the duff that's in there is forced essentially to water at that point.
I have a question.
So they're not really controlling. So maybe this isn't exactly a place we should work on this.
I think this is outside the scope of the project. Is it?
No.
No, is it?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
So
Well, it's outside the project boundary,
Okay.
but it's not outside the scope of the project. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's
I was
see.
gonna-
What does Jeff got?
Well, I was gonna say that, I mean, I was listening. This is an urban stream, I said that earlier, so we have to be really careful, anything we do, the goal here is not to increase flooding, it's actually try to make it better. And so, if you saw on the slide, we have 40,000 yards of dirt to deal with in this project, so, trust me, we can build berms on people's property.
Yes. Okay.
We have to be careful that we don't turn it into a flood control project. So we have to be really cautious of that. But we have opportunities to enhance areas, to get rid of your rock and build something that would actually function and replace it. So I just say, we have those opportunities, and it'd be a great opportunity to get rid of some of this.
Yeah.
There we go.
Because otherwise we're going to send.
So we can talk. Yeah.
So I'm kind of asking, if I was to try and do it in a way that does integrate into the project and doesn't cause conflicts there, kind of.
So,
I could get a little guidance of
so
that.
like David and Kit, we could, and even Karen, we could talk offline.
Let's have an offline.
We could talk
conversation
offline,
about
because
this.
what we did from the last meeting at 30%, we moved the grading back, so we're not grading on your property line.
Yeah,
We're doing
that's so. Let's daydream to the where we're at.
But I do want to respond that even though your property is outside of the project boundaries, the project itself is intended to, by lowering the creek and, opening it up downstream, it's intended to have more flow conveyance.
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully that will alleviate, some of these issues.
And it sounds like there should be coordination with some of that soils that are removed from the project could be coordinated and allocated for other purposes down the road. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Roxanne's question.
I was wondering to what extent the restoration is expected to restore year-round flows, or is it still going to be seasonal? Is that projectable at this point?
The channel, yeah, let me try to get.
We're going back to 2011 elevations.
Thank you.
Do you think that'll restore year-round flow?
The channel itself and the main
Yeah.
channel here is intended to pass, I think it's a 1 to 1.5 year event within the channel in its inset floodplains. Okay. We are going through the 65% design modeling right now. I don't have results for you guys at this point. I will at some point in the future. When we did the 30% design, which was bigger, we had to squeeze it in. We were able to contain a 5-year event within the channel, which is huge. I mean, it's a lot of water. My guess is somewhere between the 2 and the 5-year event would be able to be conveyed through this channel, which would alleviate some of the flooding.
I think she's asking about the creek having
Low flow.
Yeah, like during the low flow or dry season, if we're gonna have like
Because
down to
because you're
bed, we're
digging
not getting
down,
down to original bed.
and I think the groundwater's fine.
Right now, if you walk it and folks have walked it, you see pockets of gravel and you'll see a lot of fine sediment fall out of the sands. Given what we're likely to do, you'll probably see the entire stream actually coarsen, become more gravelly top to bottom, which is actually one of those geomorphic functions we're targeting. That helps John's question, that helps keep that fine sediment moving through the system. It's quite possible the creek would actually be maybe even drier in the summer because that gravel we're doing is coarser, and so it actually can accommodate subsurface easier, which isn't a bad thing, right? The water stays cooler, so if it goes downstream and hits a pool where there might be a species in it, it's actually better conditioned.
Better spawning gravels.
If I could add to that too, the Blue Lake Rancheria, Jacob Pouncey used to work there. They put in some piezometers, which are basically just pipes you put down into the ground so you can see where the water level is. And in summertime, he said that it was like 15, 16 feet down. And as Rose pointed out earlier, because the way the creek was rerouted and lengthened, there's probably no way to get the creek down deep enough to have flow during low flow season in summer.
Okay, Karina.
Well, this kind of segues. I see that we're getting to the project timeline.
Yeah, we are.
Which is good.
Yeah.
So this kind of is the piece I wanted to put in there to we can get you guys in perspective. So there's some specific spots that are particular problem areas, along the creek now, that are contributing to flooding. Part of them are erosion, some are deposition, there's the high deposits, and then there's places that are eroding. That I've been noticing just to kind of get a sense of where is that water coming from that's going 3 blocks down the road into my yard, and monitoring it when it is flooding and then when it's dry, and just different stages. And I'm just wondering, I sense that you're going to be starting toward the low end of the creek. That's where the work is going to come from there up, right?
That's typically what we do is we start from the downstream end and work our
But
way
there's
up.
some areas where there is erosion, where the water has been flooding, like that place on Charton, where it's eroding badly, right up to where the road is, where it's pouring in through the fence and filling in that whole area. I was shocked to see that it could do that. How much water does over a few hours could flood? And so I'm wondering if there are areas that you might target as you're moving upstream, but that are further up from where your focus is, to look at as far as just enhancing the flow of the this is going to be a multi-year process.
Yeah, it's going to be a multi-year process. And in fact, today I was just at Eureka Natural Foods talking to a landowner up above the boulevard. And he said that his bank on I think it's the west bank is across from him, eroded a lot. And a lot of that moved down into the channel right by the bridge where that nick point is, and it slowed down and dropped out. And that's why it degraded there like a foot this last winter.
Right.
We were talking about that when we did that walk.
So there's the place up on near Charton where it's been pouring in when water's really high, and So yeah, I was wondering about these particular areas that are sort of, one is an erosion place, one is
Yeah.
more of a choke place, like if those can be integrated into an earlier phase of the process, even as you're concentrating on, moving up the stream. That's just, and then I'm just planning that.
Do you understand? You hear?
Yeah,
what-
no, I do.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we work from downstream to upstream is because the channel itself has grade control, like we were talking about earlier. We can dig a hole up here, but if the channel's sitting like this and we don't lower that channel, then all we have is a hole up here. Okay, so if the channel is fixed down here, if we don't lower that channel first, then we can't help the area upstream. So we can, try to do a project up here and meet it. I mean, we do that sometimes when that's the most feasible thing to do. But the channel itself is not going to be functioning. All it's going to be is essentially like a sediment trap. So we kind of like, we dig out sediment traps. It'll just trap more sediment as it's coming through. If you lower the channel downstream, then it can flow all the way through.
What about with erosion areas where the bank is
Okay,
I would, if you want to provide us some of those locations, then we can be more aware of them as we're moving forward. I mean, I probably have seen some of them, but if some of them are recent from this year's flood, then I probably haven't seen them. Okay.
I could walk with you next week or something. We'll arrange that. Okay, and then I'll take pictures and give you points. Okay, John had his hand up. Thank you.
Maybe you've already said it and I missed it, but you were with the county, you designed for a 10-year storm with no damage, a 100-year storm with minimum damage. So when this is all in and complete, what storm will you pass?
Okay. I hear what you're saying about the 10-year and the 100-year storm. With the county, and Trevor, you're welcome to chime in if you want to. What the law is that you cannot increase what they call a base flood elevation over a foot on a floodplain that is within a FEMA floodplain, and you cannot increase the base flood, which is that 100-year event, at all within the channel of a floodway. Powers Creek does have a floodway. We cannot increase floods in the system by doing any project, either on the floodplain or in the floodway of Powers Creek. That is what the county is as a flood administrator, or the city as a flood administrator, is dictating by that storm event. What we're trying to pass through is, well, ultimately anything better than what's going on right now within the constraints that we have within the system. That's the reality, is that we have constraints within the system. We have parcel boundaries, we have a new bike park, we have trails, we have bridges, we have sewer systems, we have all these constraints. And within that system, what is the most water that we can pass through but still allow fish to come up and use the system as well? So that's the way that we balance things as restoration design engineers. The best flow that I was able to get through the system during the 30% design, which was a bit of a bigger channel, was the whole channel itself could pass a 5-year event without flooding, okay, out onto the floodplain. We would probably assume, as we are moving forward and redoing this model design, the design model, is that I would guess somewhere between a 2 to 5-year event. We know that right now it's flooding multiple times a year, maybe even less than once a year, so less than once a year event, or every single year we could say it's flooding. And it could be that we just have a bunch of wet years in a row. We can't really look at that until we actually look at a long timeline, but we do know that based on the hydrology of the system, it's going over bank really regularly, much more regularly than we would expect. It's flooding in areas that we wouldn't expect to have flooding. Our lower channel was designed geomorphically to be able to pass a 1 to 1.5 year event. So taking that flood that's happening right now, that's going out into Chart Road and everywhere else, we're trying to get that down into that lower channel. The channel that's sitting inside the bigger channel. That lower channel we're trying to pass that event. Okay? And then within the bigger channel, hopefully it can accommodate the 2-year event, maybe the 3-year event. Okay, and we'll get to that answer as we move through the modeling of this design. Okay.
And we're basically dealing with a system that is in a floodplain historically. So there were actually 3 creeks that flowed through that area at one point, and it got channelized, and now we're trying to drain that with one channel. So it's like we said earlier, it's complicated, and we're doing an intervention. So if we can move into Gary's presentation now, if there's other questions about the aspects of design and hydrology, we will follow up with you if you reach out to us, and we can get you a PDF of the presentation so you can study that and look at the design yourself.
Gary, am I clicking the slide?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's all good. I'll start there.
Okay, great.
Justin, is this a good location on here? Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk about some of the less fun stuff, like permitting, environmental review, paperwork type stuff. The design team gets to talk about all the cool stuff. I've got the cool one on. Thanks.
He's advanced.
Yeah. I usually get up and walk away from the mic, so he got those for me. But anyway. So anyway, this is just a little bit about the project status. As they noted, this is a Department of Water Resources grant, and this is a planning grant. It's not implementation. So that's design, what they just talked about, in the permitting and environmental review, which us planners work on. I see you taking pictures. This will also be available as well if you guys would like a copy. So, we're at the 65% design, and they're updating the basis of design report. We're working on the re-veg plan, all that kind of stuff. That's about the minimum we need to turn permits in. So I'm going to be working on turning permits in soon, and we'll have some slides after this about what those are. So this work needs to be completed pretty rapidly by June of 2025. So this 65% design, they're going to be working on finishing over the next couple months. And hopefully we'll have our permits by June or shortly thereafter. And then as Dave noted, top four, I think it was, DWR has some potential implementation funding that could pay for construction. As I think Joseph noted, we see this happening potentially in 3 phases, starting downstream hopefully and working upstream. Next slide, please. So these kind of projects, when you're doing in-stream work and you're impacting a creek like this, you got to get a lot of permits. There's a bunch of agencies you have to deal with. It can get a bit complex. But anyway, the city, is the floodplain administrator, has a floodplain management ordinance. So we do a floodplain development permit. There's also a conditional use permit that's required. This is not a use type that's specifically listed in any of these zones, and the code says in that case you require a use permit. So we'll be going to the Planning Commission. It requires a streambed alteration agreement from CDFW, 401 water quality certification from the Water Board, and we're hopefully going for a regional general permit for fisheries restoration through Army Corps. Next slide, please. So as far as the local permitting requirements in the city, I noted a few of them, but you have the conditional use permit. We've been working on that through this process for a while now. They have a new statutory exemption for restoration projects as part of cutting the green tape at the state level. So we've met with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they believe this is a good project for that exemption. So we'll be working with them to finalize that process. The flood development permit, and then of course a grading permit as well. Those are all from the city, local permits. This is a little bit about the statutory exemption for restoration projects. Essentially, the city will act as the lead agency for the California Environmental Quality Act. And the city has to make its determination first that SERP, or that statutory exemption for restoration projects, applies. And we do so in a form provided by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we submit that to them. And so they review that, and their job is to review it to determine whether they concur with that determination or not. We've already met with them in advance. We believe that they will. They like this project. So next slide, please.
Gary, hold on.
Yeah.
Can you go back to that slide for people that don't know?
Oh, good point. So that was downstream on Gary Johnson's property. Rose mentioned it before. There's a several foot difference there. And until you got really high flows, fish couldn't get up. And a lot of time it was functionally a fish barrier. And yeah, it looked horrible. And yeah. So when you see that other slide, I mean, it looks really nice today. That was a successful restoration project. Thanks for pointing that out. So just a little more, I kind of already touched on that, but we'll mention it again. So CDFW, this is the state and federal permitting, has its lake and stream bed alteration agreement. Anytime you're impacting the bed, bank, or channel of a stream, you have to get one of these from CDFW. Now, it was already submitted to them in 2022, and we got a big, long, incomplete letter back that we've been addressing since then. So bringing on Northern Hydrology, SHN, Joseph doing the revegetation plan, these are all the components they asked for in a resubmittal to CDFW. So now that we're 65% design, we have most of those components and we're ready to resubmit and address their incomplete letter. Much of what was in their incomplete letter as well were also comments from NOAA Fisheries, who commented through the Army Corps of Engineers permit process. So that was kind of combined federal and state comments on this project, and we've been working on addressing those since receiving that. Then you also have the Section 401 water quality certification from the Water Board. That's required when you're impacting waters of the state, which could be considered ordinary high water marks, kind of top of bank or edge of riparian drip line. That's their jurisdictional area. Typically, when you need an Army Corps permit, the 401 from the Water Board comes along with it. They're Clean Water Act permits. And then the Army Corps permit, Regional General Permit 12, they have these permits that they do kind of advance environmental review. It's a certain category of activity that is more of a streamlined permitting process. And as you can imagine, something like fisheries restoration is the type of thing they want to streamline as far as permitting. So that's their Fisheries Restoration Grant Program. That was also submitted in April of 2022. And again, we got comments through that process that actually ended up in the CDFW incomplete letter, which was interesting. Anyway, that's some of the fun stuff that I'll be working on over the next couple months is getting these permits turned in and hopefully getting them by June of 2025 when we're supposed to have all work completed for the grant.
And I want to point out in 2022, we were in a place where we could have lost the funding for the grant. The grant manager at the time was about to pull the plug, and Mandy, SHN, and Northern Hydrology Engineers all met with the manager at the time from Department of Water Resources, and they saw how committed this team was to that project, and we are here today because of this group of people here. So look around this room, you're part of that too, many of you. So thank you. So questions for him about the planning and the timeline?
Any permitting, environmental review questions? Yeah.
Yes, Lisa.
Yeah, Gary, so this documentation is for the planning part of it. So
Permitting, if you will.
permitting.
Yeah, I'm a planner. I use the terms
Yeah, okay,
interchangeably.
sorry,
Yeah.
didn't mean to offend you. So permitting part of it, will it include some of the design and all that? Would that be approved as well? So, or do you have to do another CEQA related and other permitting for the implementation?
So for the permitting, we'll be taking all of this design work, revegetation plan, basis of design report, all of that is what is necessary for complete application for all these permits, especially from the regulatory agencies at the state and federal level. So absolutely. They're reviewing all of that. They have experts at these different agencies and all these different areas. So they'll be reviewing it for consistency with their regulations, for adequacy as a restoration project, all those kind of things. Yeah. And the environmental review occurs as part of that. Army Corps is in charge of NEPA. That's why they consult with NOAA Fisheries under Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act. And then City of Blue Lake will be taking the role as the lead agency for CEQA. This statutory exemption for restoration project determination would be used by any other state agency that needs to comply with CEQA when issuing their permit.
Any other clarifying questions on the permitting process? Oh, yeah, Tim.
I have a question, concern, and that is, you say you're gonna work on this and get it done in this certain amount of time. The restrictions of hiring or having people in place in the federal system, is that gonna hamper the approval? If there's nobody at Fish and Wildlife or Army Corps to review this and approve it, will that delay your?
I think we all know the answer to that. Yeah, it could. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's why we're working
I mean,
so
that's
fast
something
right
we're
now.
considering across the board. Anybody who's working with federal agencies right now, relying on federal funding, that is absolutely a concern across the board, sure. And I assume if that situation arose, we would have to reach out to the funding agency and say, this is out of our control. You know, what should we do here?
In fact, I'll ask Carrie about that in my next meeting with her. Yeah.
We know
Good point.
somebody who used to work for NOAA, who might have some help.
Okay, so very, that's why he does what he does. He's so good at it. Any other questions for the night? Yes, Karina.
It's a general question, but as I walk the creek, I try to imagine what the actual implementation of the plan will be like. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of give us a sense of what there's going to be large machinery. It's going to be a lot of earth moving, and so that will impact us. And it would be good for us to be able to anticipate what's going to happen. So I'm just curious if you can kind of paint a picture of.
One of the reasons that we foresee this project happening. One of the reasons that we foresee this project happening in 3 phases is because the timeline that we can do construction in a creek is very short. You know, we have a nesting bird limitations, you know, that last up until either August 15th, sometimes September 1st. And then we have rains because we live in Humboldt County, right? So we have a very, very, very short time window. And so when you're talking about construction impacts, it's during that window and then buttoning it up. And then to the next year. Right. So I think that when we are, you know, considering construction on a creek, you consider it's construction during this time, and it's go time for us who work within the restoration field. Is that like, okay, you know, this is our construction period. What projects do we have, and what are we going to be getting done this year?
Right. So, I mean, you know, just even thinking about the machinery that needs to get into the creek,
Mm-hmm.
pull
So
the sediment
yeah,
out.
there will be
That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah.
there will be
You know, it is what it is, but it's still
there will be
it's a
yeah.
it's a quasi natural habitat, and that's going to all get disrupted, not just for the people who are living
Uh,
here, but habitat that still utilize that corridor.
Yeah,
So
I'll never forget when I first went to work for this guy in 2004, and I was like, okay, great, we're gonna do restoration, and he hands me a 3-inch or 3 foot long bar of a chainsaw and says, let's go cut that all the way. Watch out for the fence, by the way. Don't hit the remember? Yeah. And I hit the fence. So yeah, it's loud and it's you got to get machinery in there,
like
you know.
the old cliche of, you know, like you make a mess when you're, you know, baking a cake, you know, and that's unfortunately part of restoration is that there is going to be, it's going to be a construction site and there's no way around it,
and it would
unfortunately.
be in chunks. So it's obviously down there, and it would take
Right.
several seasons.
The downstream end too. I mean, it's an active gravel site.
It's
You know, it's already being used down there. So anyway, that's ideally where it would start. These are short windows, just so you noted.
So
Starting September 1st, going ideally to October 15th, or a little past if necessary. These things often push past, so it's about a 6 to 8.
yeah, and the winter time really is the best time to get those invasive species out, and just when so it's really not great to do it in the summertime. So yeah.
You have heavy equipment though, and you have to make.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Utilizing that heavy equipment. to
Okay,
get it.
yes,
Must be
that's
something
later.
that- Yeah. And-
Yeah.
and- Yeah.
We're gonna, you know, this plan is to reset the creek condition, and it's gonna be pretty drastic.
Yeah, it'll be painful
It's
to watch.
gonna be
That's
I've been doing this for 35 years, and I can say 30 years. I can just say your best way to do it is to get in, get it done quickly. Kid gloves and this stuff just actually makes a bigger mess. And we're better to just get in. Trees, you do it right, trees grow faster around here. Vegetation can come in quick. So yeah, it will be a disruption, and that's the nature of what this.
And if you look at the phases, there was, I believe, about 1,500 feet, linear feet of stream channel in phase 1, about the same in phase 2, and 600 or something like that in phase 3. So it'll be 2 big phases and then one that's going to be about half of those phases.
Good question though.
And also just remembering that the Himalayan blackberry, what's out there now, it's not good like wildlife movement corridor. We're really hoping that, you know, it's like you said, kid gloves on it. It's just gonna go along with problem. We have to get in there and clean it up.
right. I was just imagining, you know,
Yeah.
like, just the community to know like what are we in for? Not that we're up in opposition, but like it's good for us to be prepared. Like, okay, guys, this is going to be very disruptive.
It's going to be disruptive. Yes, I see a hand. Yes.
Because we have so much property that is along the creek. About planting now, that things that we could be doing now, by the time you get to our spot, that it's not so crazy.
Yeah,
Is that
I'd be
possible?
happy to talk about that. I'd be happy to talk about that with you. Because that's the best way to avoid these impacts is to do some planting now so that in a few years. Yep.
And,
Yeah.
and we also have a board member who has a crew that can do those plantings. In fact, I think he did some on the man's property and on the Glen property. And he's got a good crew of people that can get in there if you need that kind of help too. So
And we have the plant list available. You know, it's something we can give you. You know, if you're like, well, what should I plant? We can get that for you as well.
reach out to Amy, she knows how to get old. Or you can email me either way. Yeah. Okay. Well, unless there are any other questions, I want to thank everyone for participating and presenting and being good listeners and having good questions and staying on topic. And no one yelled at anyone. Well, being respectful. So thanks. Thank you. And I have stickers for anyone who wants one. They say Restore Powers Creek on them, and they were made locally here. So that one's on your way out if you want.
Does anyone still call it Dave Powers Creek?
Yes. Someone was telling me that the other day.